Some quick notes before you guys watch this episode. Still working through some technical issues. I think I got the volume right in terms of just general volume, but you'll know that my microphone is a little bit more rich than my guest's audio. So there are moments where I'm a little loud because of that. You might have to turn up your volume a little bit in general to hear everything. But it was really interesting going through editing and seeing the sound file, because my microphone, nice and rich, whereas Alice's microphone, not so much. And I don't mean to do that to call out Alice, but really what I wanted to do is point that out so that anybody who's interested in doing this is how much it matters having a decent microphone. It has a huge effect on the audio quality. Also, too, you'll notice that like 15 minutes into the thing before I realize I haven't full screened on Discord. Yep, there you go. A couple moments where the conversation stalls just because of just the natural flow. It kind of comes to an end. And so that's still me learning how to be a host and trying to get better at that. Any constructive feedback you guys have, please leave it in the comments. Let me know. Especially with sound. I mean, sound is huge. I feel like this is just something you guys will listen to. There's not really a whole lot to watch. And then regarding people who want to be part of this, I'm putting a temporary pause on anybody else. I got a good handful of people who asked to be part of this after the first episode, which was great. But really, it was like 20, maybe 25 people in total. And it felt overwhelming because I had Twitter, I had email, I had Patreon, I had messages coming from all over. So what I'm doing right now and why there's a temporary pause is I'm working with someone to get a website built up where you can apply through this website. And it'll have different things like, verifying you're over 18, decent microphone, stuff like that. So that's in the works. It's going to take a little bit of time. But there you go. So please do not request for now, just temporary for now. Please do not request to be on these episodes. I've got enough people lined up to do a couple months worth, honestly, at this point. There you go. I hope you enjoy the episode, and we'll see you soon. And okay, welcome everyone. Episode 2 of Conversations with the Community. I have my second guest who is international. Everyone, we've gone international. Alice, please go ahead, introduce yourself, tell us where you're from, what you do, so on.
Hi, Bob, and hi, audience. My name is Alice Snow. Most people just call me Snow. I am from Sweden, actually. So, there's quite a big time zone difference between me and Bob over here. And I work as a teacher, so an English teacher, in fact. So,
which grades are there? What's the age of your students, roughly?
for us, it's grade 7 to 9. I think it's equivalent in the US system. It's age 13 to 15.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's about
Most
right. That sounds similar.
Yeah. So we actually, the English curriculum in Sweden is actually like super advanced. Like we have a reputation internationally for having the best spoken English in any country that does not have English as a first language.
Oh, interesting.
And I mean, I can definitely see it in with my students since like they're young kids. They use TikTok a lot. There's a lot of like American media everywhere, and honestly, many of them, and also most of them are immigrants, so they don't have Swedish as a first language either. But their English is so good. It's like way better than when I was that age. And
Interesting.
yeah, that just constantly amazes me. But yeah, anyways,
So I had reached out to you. Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, I was going to mention that this all started. The reason I'm here today is because I wrote a message to you, I think about a month ago.
Yeah, something like that.
Just like talking to, just like mentioning how much I appreciate your channel, and I've been following along with the journey, and how I like the commentary you do on like how can I say it, like highlighting the differences in how your mindset has changed while going through all of this music, and like with Tupac, for example, like, oh, you used to have this image of Tupac without really knowing him,
Yeah.
and then all of those misconceptions, it was all shattered the moment you actually listened to the guy. And that's something that's really common, I think, with hip hop in general. It's very misunderstood, and a lot of people just refuse to get into it, and there's always talk in the media about how it's promoting violence and this and that, and yeah. So you suggested we should have a talk about that, like why these things happen and all of the misconceptions surrounding the genre.
Yeah, well, I vaguely, I should have gone back and reviewed the messages, but I remember you wrote this awesome message, kind of highlighting what you're talking about, but then you kind of spilled into this thing about how you listen to a ton of music, like not even just hip hop, like blues and jazz and soul and all, almost like the roots of what hip hop is. And then you'd
Yeah.
even gotten into how it bothers you because you have these colleagues who refuse to listen to hip hop, acknowledge it, they dismiss it constantly. But it also sounded like a lot of your students listen to this kind of music, that they enjoy it. And so to me, it seemed like a very interesting spot to begin, because on one hand, you have these educators, these teachers that are trying to work with these kids to just, I don't want to say they're necessarily role models, but they're obviously very
Yeah,
present in these children's lives.
they are role models to an extent. I definitely.
But then to have a role model, just almost, I don't know how blatant they are, but to dismiss the music that you're listening to is really like kind of crushing, in my opinion. If anytime somebody I really look up to refuses to acknowledge the music that I love, it's like it's a hard thing to deal with. So that's really
Yeah.
what spawned this coming together, this conversation. And so I guess to start off with, kind of dive into some of the other music. I mean, hip hop, soul, R&B. I mean, you listed off all kinds of people, and it sounded like you got deep into the rabbit hole there. So kind of go into that
Uh,
journey a bit.
yeah, sure. I mean, I'm just like my major passion is language and like English language in particular. Just like I do. So I read a lot of literature and poetry and all of that, but I've also like always loved music. I'm from a very musical family as well, so it's been a part of my life forever. And yeah, I listen to most stuff, honestly. Like I think what I'm best at is like indie rock, pop music, soul, folk music, and hip hop. And the reason I got into hip hop so much is just because of the way rappers use language. It's really a lyric focused genre more so than most others. I mean, there are amazing songwriters in all genres. Like Bob Dylan is one of the greatest writers ever. Um, but hip hop is special in that way that it always, like nowadays you have hip hop music, you have like southern almost subgenres of hip hop with people like Playboy Cardi or Travis Scott that do stuff mostly just because it sounds good, and they're experimenting more with the musical side of things.
Yeah.
But still, there's still this culture within hip hop that you need to be able to spit, you need to actually say something, and you need to be clever with your wordplay. And I think it has resulted in some amazing art.
I
So
yeah.
yeah,
The first thing I think of is how much I enjoyed "How Much a Dollar Cost" by Kendrick Lamar. That
yeah,
song's incredible,
it's
incredible.
amazing.
And when you, like you're saying, you get into the lyrics and the language, and because if you when you separate, I've really noticed that as I dive into hip hop, you can it's almost like a yin and a yang, although they're not really opposed to each other. It's just there's two distinct bodies. There's the beat and there's the lyrics, and
Yeah,
some of these lyrics are so good that the beat is almost irrelevant. Like you could have
yeah,
any beat as long as the timing exists. The lyrics are what are doing all the work.
yeah, and that's, I mean, you've always had, like, for almost all hip hop, you have a rapper and you have a producer. Like most hip hop is made by two people, and one is responsible for all the musical stuff, and one is just responsible for the words, and then also, of course, the performance, the delivery. That's important as well. But it's, yeah, that's kind of interesting that you just, the person who takes up the most space, who is in front, is not the one who's making the actual music. It's the person who's putting words to it.
Yeah,
It's actually saying something.
and that
Um,
for me that has been a huge kind of like a mind trip, because coming from rock, I'm so used to a large group, well, not necessarily large, but 3 to 4 to maybe 5 people working together to make the music. And maybe
Yeah.
one person is responsible for the lyrics, but a band like Rush, where the drummer's writing the lyrics and then the bass player is singing them, there's much more collaborative. And so it's interesting. I still really haven't wrapped my head around this idea that there's one person making the beats and another person strictly doing lyrics. And I imagine there is crossover. They work with each other. They're in the recording studio or whatever. And I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just a very different process, and it is interesting to
Yeah,
me.
no, often it is really collaborative. Like if you look at like especially 90s hip hop, there were a lot more groups than there is currently,
Oh,
and the
okay.
group would consist of usually one producer and then either one or more rappers. So they would like most rappers constantly work with the same people. You can notice that if you look at production credits. And then, of course, there are people like Kanye who do both things. They're like rapper producers. That does happen as well. Um,
I do have to ask one thing real quick before I forget. You're from Sweden. You said you like
yeah,
folk music. You have to be a fan of First Aid Kit, yes?
yeah, they're pretty good.
Okay, good.
They got kind of overplayed on the radio over here,
Oh, I bet. I bet.
like around 2013 or something like that.
Yeah.
So I get kind of sick of this sound for a while. But yeah, I really like First Aid Kit.
I
They're
I
good.
I'll do just a quick little sidetrack onto them. I fell in love with them and just listened to them constantly for a period of time, and I couldn't really figure out why. And then I finally understood. I'm a huge fan of Alice in Chains, and they harmonize like
Oh,
crazy. And
yeah.
so does First Aid Kit. And it finally clicked one day. Oh, that's why I love them so much. They kind of they don't necessarily remind me of Alice in Chains, but they do so much harmonizing together.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
A harmony is really just like the most perfect spice you can use in music. I love it.
Yeah, I do
I,
too.
I think the entire reason people like the Beach Boys so much is just because of the vocal harmonies. That's 90% of the music,
Yeah.
and it's so pretty.
So let's kind of dive into this idea of your colleagues. I mean, you had mentioned something about colleagues dismissing hip hop and stuff like that. Let's
Yeah,
get
I,
into
I,
that.
I kind of want to get into that a little bit because um, I maybe made it sound a bit worse than it is. It was more of just like a flippant comment. Like most of my colleagues are really great people, and they're fairly young as well, which means they're kind of open to new ideas. But still, I have heard like comments
So what kind of
when
comments? Like,
when
what do they
music has come
say?
up. Yeah, but it's more like um, how um, like when discussing music, they take up the example of something that one of the students listened to during a class, and they can say something like, "Oh, that's meaningless, and it's did this and that." And oh, we actually had a high-profile incident in Sweden recently, or actually two connected high-profile incidents. Um, so gangster rap has been getting really popular here, Swedish gangster rap. And recently there was one rapper. He's actually like the biggest rapper in Sweden. He won a bunch of awards and everything. He kidnapped or helped in the kidnapping of another rapper and extorted him.
Wow.
Um, and yeah, the second rapper snitched. So the first guy, he got sent to prison along with like an entire criminal network that he was a part of. And then the second guy got retaliation murdered. So he's dead now.
Wow.
And yeah, that's like the first time we've ever had something like that in Sweden. Like, well, like a big artist getting murdered. So
Wow.
it sparked a lot of debate.
And I'm sure
Uh,
the debate was something that's very similar to what's existed in the United States for the last 30 years about how awful
yeah,
this music is and what it inspires and what it stands for and glorifies. I mean, what have the
yeah,
stories
exactly.
been?
We have we have a pretty far right party in the parliament called the Sweden Democrats. Their entire platform is just being anti-immigration, and they actually like proposed that, oh, we should make an official investigation about the effects on violence that this music has. And it's just like, this is so insane. It's like we're back to the 80s where
Yeah.
television is bad and these violent movies and the video games and the rock music and just everything was poisoning the youth. But like there are already studies on that showing that it's complete bullshit.
It's complete bullshit. It's yeah.
Like, yeah, it's insane. I had a class with a few students. I was substitute teaching the music class because our music teacher got an eye injury. So I had actually a music class, and two of the students, oh, we didn't have anything in particular to do, so I just let them mess around with the instruments and everything because I thought it was fun, and I helped them out as much as possible. And there were these two guys that grabbed like a microphone, hooked it up to a speaker, and they started rap battling each other. They were 15 years old, both of them, ninth graders. And the things they would say when rapping, it was so violent, it was so extreme, it was so intense, but like obviously it was all tongue in cheek. I didn't try to censor that or stop it in any way because it's so obvious that it's not something they actually do. Like if they say, "Oh, I'm gonna shoot you up with this automatic rifle and everything," like this is just a regular kid. He's not violent. Right. It's just like more of the aesthetic. That I think that's the only effect that violent music can have is that it kind of creates an aesthetic of violence, where like, oh, you hear all these cool people say this, oh, then that's what you're supposed to say, but I don't think that has any real impact on violence because to you it's just it's just that it's just an aesthetic. So
I immediately think of Die Lit and or I guess not necessarily Die Lit, but Playboi Carti and actually what was it? Was it Die Lit? Oh yeah, it was Die Lit. Are you familiar with the album Die Lit?
Yeah, I've listened to it.
It was the one with the chopper's not gonna miss. I don't know if you saw my reaction, but I specifically didn't really care for that song because of those lines. Chopper's not gonna miss. I got a 100-round drum in my AK, and it's gonna just pew 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 pew. And as soon as you said that about it's tongue in cheek and it's aesthetic, I thought what an interesting collision between exactly what you're saying and how somebody on the far right parliament would try and interpret it and twist it to make it sound like this is proof, because specifically with that track, I had conflict with that. I had a hard time with that because it's been so neat for me to go into hip hop and really start to learn the lyrics and understand the stories and go, wow, there's way more here than I thought there ever was. And then to have that song pop up and it almost felt like a step back, but it's what you're saying. It's tongue in cheek. And I've had other people in comments tell me the same thing. It's, don't take it so seriously. It's just a song. It's just a song. And so, kind of go into that. How, in terms of the parliament and the things that you're hearing on the media, are they now trying to find specific songs to use as an argument of proof against hip hop and how terrible it is for the kids?
I have to admit I haven't been following the debates that closely because no one else is actually taking this seriously. It's only no one is taking that suggestion seriously. It was only that one, the one political party.
Well, that's nice to hear.
The ruling government is like no.
Okay, good. Good.
So
now, what about your students?
It's not going to lead to anything.
Whatever your students thought about this whole event that happened and how it relates to music and what's been their response?
Well, part of me wants to say they don't really take it seriously. Because like I remember the week or so after the murder, when I got to work and I was talking to them, it was like a 50-50 between people being like, "Oh, rest in peace, that sucks that he died," and other people being like, "Well, he shouldn't have snitched. That was a dumb move. He fucked with the wrong people." It's like, well, yeah, you shouldn't victim blame someone for their own homicide, maybe.
Yeah. That's a little harsh. I don't know. I won't dive into the whole snitches get stitches type of things, but that's interesting. And then, so then what about your colleagues? And did your colleagues have any relation between events like that and the music? And
yeah, but that's when it came up a lot. Like, oh, look at this guy. He just got sent to jail, and yeah, he was kidnapping and extorting someone, and then he won a bunch of awards, and our students are listening to him. It's bad influence, etc., etc. Um,
Interesting.
so yeah, that's like where it came up, and
I mean, it is.
of
It
course,
is.
like, yeah,
It is a bit of a clash. On one hand, to try and appreciate someone's music and regard it for what it is, and the fact that the kids look up to it and stuff, and then he goes off and does something horrible and then wins a bunch of awards. It does send an I don't know, I don't want to say it's a complicated message, but it is a
yeah,
little strange. It is a little strange.
yeah. But that was something I actually wanted us to kind of get into. That, like, for even if I'm like defending being open here, and I really appreciate that someone like you were able to, change their mind on it. I definitely understand why this misconception exists about hip hop and where it stems from, and I mean, it's painfully obvious. I think perfect example to use when talking about this is Jay-Z, because on the one hand, because he talks about everything, and it started off just being like, "Oh, I'm a drug dealer. I sell drugs and I kill people." That's most of Reasonable Doubt is that, and of course, there's like the inner turmoil related to that. Um, but then in subsequent albums, he got more into his personal life, and it was more he was getting more political as well. He has he has at least some like really politically conscious songs, and there's always this like, well, how can you be saying this on the one hand, oh, we should lift the black community up, we should stop black on black violence, and advocating for social change, but at the same time, you're kind of bragging about your success as a drug dealer, and you're spending all your money on all these expensive things. But I think to really understand why that disparity exists and why there's such a conflict between those two things, you need to try to just like empathize and put yourself in the shoes of someone like that. Like, you come from nothing. Your mother is a crackhead. You don't have a father. Everyone around you is doing crime. That's the only way you can reasonably escape out of poverty. I mean, you can become a basketball star, but I mean, not everyone can become a basketball star.
Right.
That's like winning the lottery, but except it takes a lot more work. So like the dealing drugs and all that is just a fact of life, and I think that's the way he presents it as well. When he talks about it, JC, it's not like I think I'm a great person for doing this. It's more just like, this is my lifestyle. I'm putting it out here,
Yeah.
and when someone like that finally makes it, finally gets money, of course they want to show it off. They've never had anything before.
Right.
They want to like, and especially I remember you mentioned in one of your reactions, I don't remember which one, but you said something about a Tyler the Creator quote where it's like, my worst fear is going broke, even though he has a lot of money, and of course that's not so weird, really. I mean, it makes a lot of sense.
It
If no one around you has money and you finally get that money, you don't think it's going to last. It can be gone any second. So
well,
why
and-
not make the most out of those seconds and just
yeah.
like buy all of this fun shit and just have a good time?
Well, and what was it? Oh, I had it in my head and I just lost it. There was another lyric recently. It was it was To Pimp a Butterfly, Dr. Dre. There's that little bit from Dr. Dre about anybody can get it, but the hard part's keeping it. And
Yeah.
then relating that to what Tyler said, and when Tyler said it and I first heard it, I really found that to be pretty profound, because I've never considered the idea of making it big and getting all this money and then all of a sudden you're broke again, and then to listen to something like Illmatic, where Nas is talking about New York and what it's like to live there in that inner city and dealing with all that shit. And so taking those ideas, Illmatic, that kind of setting, even with some of the Kendrick stuff too, with Compton, and
Yeah.
then to make it and get a bunch of money, and then have this idea in the back of your head that maybe someday you'll go broke and your only thing will to be go back to where you came from, which is kind of
Yeah.
like growing back to hell after crawling your way out. And what you just said too about the lottery was an interesting point, because so often we hear stories about people who win the lottery and it ruins their life. They get all this money, they can't manage it, they piss it all away, and then 5-7 years later they're even worse off than when they started. Interesting. It's very interesting. Well, let's see. I feel like we've wandered off the track just a tiny bit. Which is good. I mean, I like the fact that
Well, yeah.
the conversation's organic and we're just going where we're going. But
I mean, we're kind of in lane a little bit. It's like what we're talking about right now is the reasons why hip hop is the way it is and why they project these messages, and yeah, these messages in turn by people who don't have the empathy to, or at least do not make the conscious effort to understand where it's coming from. That's when you get that disparity in your head of like, why does he say this but then do this? Why is hip hop supposed to be like this political movement about uplifting people, but all I hear on the radio is look at my big car and I'm gonna shoot this dude in his face.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I thank you for pulling me back in, because I lost track of where and yeah, you're right, because that's the point where the dismissiveness of hip hop pops up. That's where it comes from. It's just, for whatever reason, there's this initial layer that you have to penetrate to get through to really start understanding what the music is about. And if you never push through that layer, it's like exactly like what you said. It's just, you see all the surface, the flash, the bling, the cars, the money, spending a bunch of money on stuff, and it does all seem very superficial. And in a way, especially like what you're talking about, how it's, sometimes it's supposed to be a political or uplifting thing. In a way, it almost seems to be dismissive of its own community, in the sense of, it's almost like a ha ha ha, I made it, you didn't. I mean, not exactly, but if you're not listening, if you want to be dismissive of hip hop, if you want to put it down, you would kind of use that as an example. Like, look, they don't even care. They're just out there living their big life now after they've made all this money.
Yeah, and like a really fun, or maybe not fun, but an interesting point related to that hip hop history lesson here is that that message comes from within the genre as well. It does, so like there's always been a lot of infighting in hip hop about what is real hip hop, what isn't real hip hop, and I think this was at its worst in the early aughts, like 2001 to 2006 maybe, where there was like this. It was basically a shift. It was completely divided 50-50 in the hip hop community. You had the mainstream bling era rappers. It was all about luxury basically. Even more commercial than today, I would say. And then you had the underground rappers who were all about preaching political messages and being woke and conscious, and they really like lashed out and like tried to like, this isn't real music. Nas released an album called Hip Hop is Dead.
Oh, no
Like,
kidding.
the genre is dead. We've killed it. It's become too commercialized. It's not real anymore. We've lost our message. And
Wow.
a lot of people thought that way. And it's only like later that we've kind of come to recognize the fact that no, these are just two different ways of expressing things. Like they're the same people, they come from the same struggles, but they voice that in different ways. Some of them celebrate their own success, and some of them that should focus on social change in the community and what should be done to alleviate the problems. And many do both. So,
Yeah.
but it's interesting that even within hip hop itself, other rappers have those same worries about this is not good. We shouldn't be putting these messages out there. It's not good for our community.
And I think really that's a good thing. It does show that there's some thought process surrounding the art itself and what it stands for. It does bring the question in my mind too of, so with that being the case, even if rappers are infighting, what's what's the answer to this question? How do you reach someone? How do you, in a simple way, in a kind of like a short term way, how do you get to someone and explain to them, no, 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 you don't understand hip hop? Because the only reason I understand it now, or at least am beginning to, is because I've taken a lot of time. But most people
Yeah,
don't want to spend 10, 20, 30 hours listening to music. They want an answer in 5 minutes. So
yeah.
how do you do that? And then even more so, how do you do it to somebody who already doesn't necessarily want to hear it to begin with? And, what have you ever had a thought in your head where it's like, maybe if I formulate it this way, if I can explain hip hop this way, or even if you had an experience, and then somebody will go, oh, well, maybe I'll check it out. That because I think that's really the goal, is to just plant
Yeah.
the seed, get somebody to say, yeah, I will check that out. That sounds interesting. I mean, have you had any experiences like that where you've talked to someone and given them that little seed to start with?
Yeah, a few times actually. I try to promote hip hop as much as I can, and I think that it's not that difficult actually. If you're talking to someone like face to face, and you can be like, "Oh, this is what it is, and this is why they're talking about this stuff." Like most people that like have a reasonable thought process are able to follow along. They understand if you or I were to make the same arguments we're making now, they would be on board with that. I think the big issue is more like people who don't get that, who don't have that experience. They just hear the music for themselves, they dismiss it, and then it's just this negative attitude kind of grows inside of their head, and they paint everything as bad. And unfortunately, I'm not sure if that is something we can actually alleviate in any way, because you do need, like, all art in some ways needs cultural context. And the only reason why some art can be understood immediately is because we already have the cultural context, and it's something that relates to our lives and our everyday culture. But if you have a lifestyle, or like a culture that is just widely different from something else, then you need to put yourself into it in order to be able to appreciate it. And so with people who don't have the same socioeconomic circumstances as the people making hip hop music, they're always going to have to go that extra mile in order to fully appreciate what it's all about.
Yeah, I agree with that. And while you were saying that, I was wondering, you'd mentioned they just have this negative idea and they paint everything with that. And I
Yeah.
wonder what kind of elements, I love blaming mainstream media any chance I get. Yeah, I wonder what additional elements add to that just painting of everything, because even when I think back, 90s hip hop was really blowing up. Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, and I mean just blowing up crazy. And
Yeah.
even then, I had never taken the time to listen to it. I loved music. I was into heavy metal most of the time. But for some reason, somehow, and I assume a part of it has to be just the music videos and what I saw and stuff, but somehow this negative idea was put into my head about hip hop and what it is and what it stands for. And I honestly can't figure out where it came from. I really don't know. And it's just the strangest thing to me that an idea that's so prominent can get leaked into my brain and just exist without even me being aware of it being put there. And
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just so strange. I don't like that. I really don't like that because it makes me wonder what else is in my head that isn't from my own mind, that's like seeped in from outside. It worries me. I want to have control of my own
And
thoughts.
it shows as well. Yeah, you always need to try to be conscious of those things. Like, you have so many thoughts in your own head that aren't actually your thoughts. You've just absorbed them from your environment, and if you don't like second guess them in any way, then yeah, it might actually be something that completely opposes your actual values and what you would believe otherwise. And I think you're right in blaming the media, because, like, I mean, the media was definitely mainstream media was definitely against hip hop. Not so much nowadays, but like in the 80s and 90s, oh for sure. like the way they wrote about NWA.
Yep.
And yeah, and even Tupac, like everything about Tupac, it never focused on his music or his message. It was always about his tumultuous personal life
Yep.
and what was going on there. And then everything was about, oh, he got killed because of like a rivalry within the music genre. That's even more proof that you shouldn't be doing hip hop because you're gonna kill other rappers, basically.
Yeah.
And also, if we're talking about other factors like outside that may influence this idea, I think we would kind of be doing this topic a disservice if we didn't at least mention racism. I mean, it's not the
Yeah.
most
Yeah.
it's not the most fun or like nuanced point to bring up, but I mean, you can't deny that. I mean, with America's history of racism and like, especially in music, black artists have always been less appreciated, and I mean, even and this is even recently, like in oh, this is not music, but in the 80s, Basquiat was like the biggest artist in probably all of the Western world. And one of his paintings sold for like a few years for the biggest sum that any American painting has ever been sold for. And his influence reaches everyone worldwide. He's like widely recognized as an amazing artist, but many people don't ever learn about him at all. And you cannot see his works displayed in any museums. And when the media wrote about him, even during the peak of his fame, it was always like, oh, he's this wild, untamed artist, and it was like this really weird racist subtext, and he was referred to as like Andy Warhol's mascot and things like that. And it's just insane to hear great artists talk about that way. And so like with hip hop, even of course there are going to be people that are explicitly racist and be like, oh, I'm not going to listen to music that these people make. It's I think the bigger issue, because it affects more people, is just that there's still that grain of racism running all throughout society, and that will inevitably affect how our culture at large looks at a predominantly black genre of music.
Yeah, and I think that feeds in really well to the concept of ideas seeping into your mind that aren't necessarily your own. That's something I'm glad you bring that up, because honestly, I continually, and I hate to say this, but I continually forget about racism.
Yeah.
And, I'm sure people will say that's a white privilege. Maybe it's just my neighborhood. I grew up in California. It's where I grew up, it's predominantly white and Hispanic. And all of us kids played together. Something that makes me so happy right now is my son, he goes to a school. It's a pretty good mix. Nobody seems to care at all. Like the kids are all friends and run around, and I'm just like, I'm so happy. I'm so happy to see that. It's wonderful. But unfortunately, yeah, you're right. I mean, you're right. There are people who, I even mentioned this when I listened to Travis Scott for the first time. I pulled up Rodeo, and on Spotify, I was scrolling down and looking at stuff, and there's his like profile picture, and I went, oh. I just had this immediate response to the image of his profile picture. Yeah. And I thought to myself, well, this is interesting. I actually need to talk about this. I need to confront this, talk about it on the video, because it was a prejudice. Like I saw he had his grill and his tattoos and his dreads, and I was like, oh shit. And it's like, well, where is this coming from? Like, why do I feel this way? It's literally just a picture of a guy, and that's it. Yeah. But there was this response, and so I mean, it's kind of embarrassing, honestly. But when I said that, people were very open to the fact that I could at least acknowledge it, because if you don't, I feel like when you have these little moments, if you don't acknowledge them, if you just ignore it, it almost ingrains it further. It drives it deeper into your brain, and it buries it, and then you get to a point where you don't acknowledge it at all. And it makes me sad to think that something like that there are people out there that would do something so simple as see a picture of an artist and go, I'm not listening to that. Like that just blows my mind. And then this painter you're talking about, I don't know much about the painting world, but even in media, to hear somebody be twisted around instead of just being, here's an artist, here's the painting, end of story. because
Yeah.
the color of his skin should be completely irrelevant. No, no, no. They got to twist it around and make it like some sort of one-off. Like this doesn't normally happen, and you shouldn't expect it to happen again or something like that.
Yeah.
It fucking kills me, man. It really does.
Yeah. It's
I don't like
I
it.
don't
I don't like it at all. I know that's kind of it leaves us off at like a weird dead point because it kills the conversation, but
know. Yeah, I get it. But like I said, I think we had to touch on that like at least a little bit because
absolutely.
it is definitely a
Absolutely.
part of why hip hop music is regarded the way it is because it's predominantly black.
Now I have a
And
question for Swedish rappers. What's and I hate to ask this because personally I feel like it's irrelevant, but given this
yeah,
current context, I mean, what are the races of Swedish rappers? I mean, you said that you have a
uh,
decent amount of immigrants. I have no
yeah.
idea what your makeup is in that country.
Well, so just like I can start by answering that generally, I guess. Sweden is known for taking in very large amount of immigrants. I think number one in the world when
Oh
it comes to
wow.
like per capita immigrants. Yeah, one of our major cities is actually in Malmö. It's the third largest city in the country. I think it has about 500,000 people, and half of those are estimated to be first or second generation immigrants. Or actually more than half. I think it's a majority, which is very unusual.
Yeah. Where do they
And
immigrate from? Is it specific
it's
countries or all over?
it's been different throughout time, of course, because like it's when we talk about like mass immigration, people don't just move because they think it's a fun idea. They have
Right.
to. It's usually because of wars or stuff like that. So back in the day, there would be a lot of Turkish immigrants, Finnish immigrants, and Yugoslavian immigrants. But nowadays, it's mostly the Middle East and the Somalia.
Oh, okay.
My school is in one of the ghettos, I guess you could call it, suburbs of Sweden, and it's our school is very dominated by the Somali population, for example. So like most of my students are black, even if that's not like the biggest ethnicity in Sweden. And it's the same when it comes to hip hop music. Since just like in the United States, it's not like rich kids making the music.
Mm,
It's the people from the ghettos. So almost no one is white, even at the top level of Swedish hip hop. It's mostly Somali guys, and there's a bunch of other ethnicities as well, Arabs and stuff like that. Yeah.
interesting. Interesting. Ha! This is going to sound so stupid. How do they handle the cold?
Well, luckily, global warming has been helping out a
Oh
bit.
God. That's good. Thank you. You managed to take my horrible question and just pile on with even worse information.
Yeah,
I
it
I
was the
u-
easiest way to avoid answering.
I used to work with a guy who he was from Somalia. Great dude. He cracked me up so much. But every now and then in California, like California doesn't really get that cold where we are.
Yeah.
And it would dip down into like the 50s or the 40s, and he was like, "Oh, it's so cold." I'd always give him a hard time, like, "Come on, man, it's not that bad."
No.
uh, um, have you ever? Let's see, what do I got here for questions? Where are we at? We're about 45 minutes. This is where I suck as a
I can check
host.
my notes as well. I put up some points I wanted to talk about.
Yeah, but
Mm.
because I feel like we've had a pretty good conversation here, man. I appreciate some of the points that you've brought up. It's been interesting. It bums me out. You're talking about how the top rappers are basically coming from some of the lowest income areas and stuff, and it just man,
Yeah.
it kills me that this is such a recurring theme, and I don't even want to associate it with hip hop at all. I don't really think that matters other than the sense of people can use hip hop as a way to get out. I
Yeah.
think really what bothers me the most is the fact that there's so many people that need to get out of
Yeah.
these horrible situations that they're in. And I sit here and I think, man, it'd be nice to be able to fix that. And then I go, well, yeah, it'd be nice to fix a lot
Yeah.
of things, and I have no idea where to begin.
Yeah. Now, that's because, like I mentioned before, when talking about JC, that Well, one other way to get out would be to become a basketball star, but
Right.
of course, not everyone can do it. And unfortunately, it's the same with rappers. I mean, if you look at an entire housing project in the United States, in any major city, like imagine all of the young kids there becoming rappers. It just couldn't work.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense. It would be way too many rappers, and no one would listen to all of them. So it's not a solution that actually works long term. And that's also kind of interesting that when you listen to rappers talk about the issues in their neighborhoods and even solving them, they never say, "Oh, you should go and be a rapper too." That's never the recommendation,
Yeah.
because they
Right.
know how fucking lucky they were, and how much like talent and hard work it required that you just can't expect out of everybody. So it's never about that. It's always about, actually fixing the problems, and like either advocating for systematic change that would like just take away the problem entirely, or more like JC, like giving financial advice and uh, encouraging support for black-owned businesses, which is more. It's not as great in the long term, but it works for when you're already stuck inside the system. It's what we can do to make it better.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. You talk about black owned businesses, and I immediately think I like that idea a lot. And then I think about in America how there's things like Amazon and Walmart and Target and these just massive corporations that are slowly but steadily crushing all of the small businesses, which is only going to make it worse. It's
Yep.
only going to make it worse. And that's another tide I don't know how to stem. It's just, I remember reading articles about local communities, how they would uh, effectively have their own currency just to try and keep the money in the town, because
Yeah,
even if you work in the town
that's
and
insane.
everybody's paying each other, but then they all turn around and buy stuff from Amazon, it's just the money is leaving the town. It's leaving the town, and then all of a sudden there's nothing.
Exactly. And then, yeah, that's why local business helps. And yeah, when it comes to black community, black-owned businesses, that's why it would help, because the money would circulate around.
Hmm.
If you're buying a whatever, buying food, then the money for your food would go to your neighbor, and it would stay within the neighborhood, and you would be lifting up other people while just living your everyday life, and it would benefit the entire community.
Yeah,
Um,
and that whole
so
idea just amplifies how hard it is for a low income area to ever begin to crawl its way up and thrive. Because if nobody
yeah,
has any money to begin with, they can't support the businesses, and then the businesses can't
no.
support themselves, and so they can't employ anybody, and then there's no money. It's just a constant feedback loop.
Yeah, and it's not going to change either. Which is why, like I said, I think it's a good short-term solution, but like realistically, long-term, you cannot have this system intact, because it just keeps. I mean, like for every year, the bigger corporations get bigger and bigger, the richer people get richer, while like nothing happens to ordinary people. The wealth disparity just keeps increasing. So that's something that's always going to exist during this under this system.
Yeah. Well, this is all wonderfully depressing. Let me
Yeah.
let
Yeah,
me
this was a dark one.
let me end with hopefully a question that will be a little bit more uplifting. You talk about your students, and you talk about how the area that you're in is could be considered a type of ghetto. Tell me
Yeah.
about the students who are listening to hip hop, and they're hearing these messages, these stories from these other artists, and hopefully in some way they're being lifted up. I mean, have you seen examples where a kid is just really into a certain artist or a certain song or an album, and you can see them being inspired by that music? I mean, have you had experiences like that?
Yeah, for sure. Actually, like a lot of my students, they've caught on to the fact that I also listen to a lot of hip hop music. So some of them would like run up to me and be like, "Oh, have you heard this new? Oh, it's so fun!" And then you can see them all like blasting the music really loudly in the corridors, and just like having a great time and being happy, because this is theirs. And like especially if it's a rapper from like a local area, from somewhere.
Oh,
Oh,
sure.
oh, my cousin knows that guy. Like it's a really fun, and it was also like thanks to my student. This is somewhat related. It was also thanks to my student that I like firsthand got to experience how important it is with like representation in media. I remember we were watching a movie. This was like close to Christmas or Halloween or something like that. So it wasn't actually related to any subject. It was just for fun. And someone they were just like, "Oh, can we watch this movie? The main guy is a black guy." And it was like, "Oh, yeah, sure." Like I didn't thought that would be like the motivating factor for watching it. But like of course it's like they finally got the opportunity to see others like them on the screen. And
Yeah.
that was like an empowering moment for everyone. Like it was really noticeable.
Yeah, that's something I have always struggled with, and probably because I'm white, and probably because throughout my
Yeah.
entire life, every TV show, movie, everywhere, it's just yeah, I'm overrepresented, really. Um, it is great to hear something like that, and I that's something I've come to learn somewhat recently. I wish I had learned it a long time ago, but it's been somewhat recently that yeah, it matters. It does matter, especially I think what happens is I think of it in terms of my own mind and how I perceive things. But I'm not a 9-year-old kid anymore, and so it matters for these young kids to see
Yeah.
themselves and see the potential that can exist. Like, oh, if he's doing that, I could do that. Like that's someone that's just like me. That means I could do that
Yeah.
too. Have there been? What are some of the songs? Like, what are there any songs recently that's come up that like people are that some of the kids are just really into lately?
I think the overall most popular rapper at my school, and this is kind of weird, it's a guy called Polo G. I don't know if you've heard of him.
No.
Yeah, he's a trap rapper. He does like a mix between singing and rapping. Um, yeah, he's kind of popular in the US as well. I'm just surprised to see him as like the number one artist, but they always play his music every single time. So
No.
that's if you want to know what the streets listen to in Sweden, you
Yeah.
should put on
Polo G,
Polo
huh?
G.
That's cool, man.
Um,
Have they mentioned any lyrics specifically? Like, I really like it when somebody can touch on a song and go, yeah, this line right here is what's really getting me going. Like I was having a bad day, but then I
yeah,
put this song on, and here's the line that gets me going. Are there any lyrics that have stand out?
gosh, I don't. They don't really focus on the lyrics that much. I
Okay.
have to admit, it's for them. It's all about just the fun vibe and
Hmm.
experience of it all. And and like I said, they all do like a lot of TikTok as well. So they want music that's fun to dance to. They're not really paying attention to all of that. Maybe they might when they get older, or they are probably doing it subconsciously. But
Yeah,
yeah,
maybe, huh? That's something. Again, like I was saying just before, my own perspective. It's interesting how much that wraps my worldview and encloses my worldview because I love lyrics, but I've had so many
yeah,
people who love
same.
Dialect and they say, no, man, it's all about just that vibe, having fun, like you were saying. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. Well, we're 54 minutes in. Was there anything else that you wanted to touch on specifically? I feel like we've had a pretty good conversation
No,
here.
no, yeah, we that was great. I think I think we can end it here with
Okay.
a good conscience.
Yeah, yeah, it got a little dark there for a little while.
Yeah.
But I mean, unfortunately, that's our reality right now.
Yeah.
I will admit that one of my secret hidden agendas for this channel is just to try and create something positive. So it's like for years that's been eating away at me that there's just so much wrong, and it's like there's got to be something. There's got to be something that we can do as just people.
Yeah. And I think you've succeeded in that, definitely. Like just seeing your community and
It's a
all
wonderful
the comments
community.
on Patreon. People are so it's all about just sharing the love and
Yep.
passion for music,
Yep.
and yeah, it really brings a smile to my face every time because I'm the same way,
Yeah.
and I can really relate to all of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, sorry for working against your goal of creating a positive space with this conversation. We'll have to pick a lighter topic if we ever talk again.
That was perfect.
Um,
You can't have light without the darkness. That's I know
no,
it's a
for
cliche
sure.
thing, but yeah, there you go. Well, Alice, I guess we'll close it up here.
Yep.
Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down and chat with me, man. It's a great
Yeah,
time.
thank you.
And I guess for those listening, that's episode 2. I did notice like 15 minutes in, I didn't go widescreen on on my Discord, so it just sat
Oh,
there. So it's another rookie mistake by me. That's okay.
well,
I'll get a little bit better. All right, y'all. We'll see you again next time.
bye.